Well, to be fair, I think if we were looking at a private sector employer, they'd probably be looking at awarding 6% for their staff as well. There are plenty of recruitment and retention problems in the public sector, just as there are in the private sector. So I think it is necessary to pay people in the public sector a little bit more. It's also worth stressing that these numbers are basically the numbers recommended by the independent pay review committees. Now, nothing's perfect about this, but I think as a starting point, what the independent experts say is appropriate is probably as good as any.
It's interesting how you look at the numbers there, and it still hasn't been at all costed. There are only several ways of paying for this kind of thing. That's either putting taxes up, which they would be electoral suicide, surely, making cuts, or borrowing more money. Well, we're 2.6 trillion pounds in debt. They have, however, talked about a war on the civil service. Do you think that might be the way forward? Is this like the revenge on the blob?
Well, first of all, it is hard to put numbers on this because it depends what you think the alternative was. Realistically, people are not going to get a 0% pay rise. They probably would have got, say, 3-4% otherwise. So for a start, you have to look at what the additional element of this is going to be. In terms of paying for it, of course, the government is saying it's going to come from efficiency savings and other weaknesses, like, for example, getting migrants to pay more for accessing the NHS. So the government would presumably argue that the net cost wouldn't be too big. I guess for me, the question is, what is the alternative? If you didn't pay people more, then you would have these continued big problems of recruitment and retention in the public sector. Our public services would probably suffer. And also the strikes would continue. So it's very difficult to get the balance right, but I think figures around about the 6% number are probably in the ballpark that's correct.
Well, Julian, one idea that's been floated this week to pay for £1 billion worth of this is to charge foreigners who arrive in the UK a £400 per year flat immigration surcharge to use the NHS. Do you think that seems fair? After all, they don't pay in.
I think it probably is fair. I mean, it's worth stressing, of course, that people who are living and working here are paying tax in all sorts of ways and contributing to the economy. So it's not as if they are contributing nothing to the NHS. But there's certainly a possibility that some people are coming here purely to access the NHS, and the more that we can charge them, I think, the better. So that does seem like a reasonable measure. I mean, I personally, of course, would like to see more charging in the NHS as a means of controlling the, at the moment, uncontrolled demand for it. And maybe with foreigners paying a bit more, that would be a good starting point.
Finally, the Bank of England is continually banging on that increasing wages causes spiralling inflation, despite the fact they printed £900 billion worth of free money during the pandemic. Is there any merit to the idea that giving out billions of pounds worth of pay rises will actually exacerbate inflation?
No, I don't really buy that. I think that inflation is mainly about monetary policy. As you say, the Bank of England mistakes there, keeping interest rates too low for too long and printing all the extra money. I think that wages are simply about redistributing the amount of income we have in the economy. And if some wages have to go up more than others in order to fix problems of recruitment and retention, I think that's absolutely fine. It's certainly ought also to focus just on the public sector here. After all, we're talking here about a few million public sector workers compared to the 25 million or so in the private sector. And if private sector workers are getting 6-7% or more, as the official figures suggest they are, then it seems a bit odd to complain that public sector workers might be getting a little bit less than that.